All sports, all plays. Yeah. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, they work in your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.
Ready, Porter?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, I guess I'll lead us off. How's everybody doing? Welcome to the first episode of Blown Coverage. We are ready to roll. So up in the top left, we have producer and Michigan State fanatic Tony Hollinsworth. Down at the bottom, we have Porter Hayes, who is the director of sports and culture at Arkansas. He also has the Hog Talk podcast. The guy does a little bit of everything. Me, I'm Chris Osborne. I cover the Georgia Bulldogs. And I also do Loose Lugs, also with the ASAP Sports Network. I want to throw it over to Tony first. Tell us a little about ASAP, what you guys are working on right now.
Yeah, so ASAP Network, we cover pretty much all sports. We primarily do a lot of NFL and NBA. We actually, I think this is now our third college football show that we have on here. First that I'm a part of, so I'm excited. We talk just about everything. We also have a couple wrestling shows. We're working on getting hockey shows. We're even potentially working on getting an all-female show started as well, which we think would be absolutely awesome. You can catch us pretty much everywhere. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, Twitter. We even have our own website as well. You can watch us stream there if that's just easier for you guys. And we got a great group of guys and girls both. You know, we're lucky enough to have some really, really good female analysts as well, part of the team.
That's awesome. You guys have done really cool things with Loose Lugs, and I appreciate that. Tony's also the producer there. So let's throw up the rankings real quick, and let's go over this. Bye, dog.
Yeah. Toby's made an appearance. All
right. So this is what just came out Tuesday. I think all three of us kind of have the same level of discrepancies. There's some stuff that's good on here and some stuff that I just don't agree with. I'll open the floor, Porter, if you want to throw out, some things you don't like about this list and what you do.
Two things. Them throwing Bama in it too at the initial selection rankings shows me that they're showing Bama the grace of losing to an unranked Texas A&M team, and that gives them a filter to try. To me, it's like they're trying their best to get two SEC teams in no matter what. That's been their goal. That's where the bread and butter is for the ESPN because that's who they cover. Now, if they lose to Auburn and then Georgia, that's a different story. But they're basically, if you're looking at the rankings based on now, if Alabama goes in and loses a close game to Georgia, they'll more than likely they have a reasoning of saying, well, we're just going to bump them to 4 and then we'll do it again.
Yep.
So I would switch. I would put Bama at 4 because let's be real. On the field, they are one of the top 4 teams in the country. I will not discredit that. I will not argue that with anybody because they are. So I would have put them at 4 to basically say, look, you're in, but if you lose another game, you're out. So by them putting them at 2, it's showing Bama, well, we can go in maybe as a 2-loss team, which has never happened, but we're talking about Alabama. So I would put them at 4 and then put Michigan State and then Oregon because, Michigan State's wins, they've got more of them. Oregon's got that win at Columbus that really holds, what they're going. But I think they're looking at 3 and 4 is going to slip. So what that also means is as long as Bama's nestled in there at 2, there's no fear of these other teams coming up, maybe like an OU or somebody like that coming up from behind and overtaking Alabama.
Yeah, I'd agree for sure. Because when you look at if you look at number one, you have Georgia and Bama. We pretty much already know that's going to be the SEC championship is going to be, Georgia and Bama. To me though, what kind of hurts is the fact that like Porter said, if you have that and Bama loses, they A should be out of the playoff contention, but B, if Georgia loses, why are you really going to bring that back as far as in the playoffs? Like, if you look at out of all the conference title games that they have, who is always your moneymaker? It's always Georgia versus. It's always the SEC championship. Your SEC championship can almost be better than the actual playoff contention of whoever the national championship is. So I'd agree 100%. I think honestly they're waiting to see if Bama stumbles. And to be honest with you too, I think they're kind of wondering who they put in the other two spots. Who's going to come out of the Big Ten? Do they put a Pac-12 team? Do they put a Big 12 team? Do they throw Cincy in there? Who else do they throw in that they think would be a stronger contention against pretty much the SEC?
I mean, Oklahoma's got a case because it's almost like in basketball, when you look at the NCAA tournament, their biggest criteria when it comes down to it is how do they finish the last 10 games? You always see that graphic. What was their final 10 games like? Whether it's, 8-2, 7-3, 9-1, or 10-0. That's been, it's how you finish. Ever since OU changed their quarterback situation and got Caleb Williams in and Spencer Rattler's out now, they're a whole different team. It seems like they're together more. It's not the Spencer Rattler show. And I'll tell you what, off the top 25, me being a Clemson fan, I think that's what's happened to Clemson. The same situation. DJ, you get this hype, and some kids just can't handle the hype. We come in, he's this all-American quarterback. He's this highly regarded. And then on top of that, just like Spencer Rattler, you've got to follow in the footsteps of Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Look at Spencer Rattler. Who does he got to go behind? He's got to follow behind Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. So it all intertwines of sometimes the kids just can't handle it. And he's just not proven that he is as good. And I don't know if it's all mental or what, but physically he's not as fast as either one of them. So he can't run the ball as well. And his arm strength's out there. I mean, there was times where he would throw the guy under 5-10 yards. So that's what's happened to Oklahoma. Oklahoma State, they're one of them. It's almost like when it comes to Michigan. I compared them to Michigan. They're always good, but they got to prove to me that they can beat Oklahoma and on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. That's the way I see that playing out. And they even got to play, I believe they still got Baylor on the horizon too. Another team, if we're going to look at two lost teams who could potentially get into the playoffs, Auburn's sitting there at 13. A big if, they run the table and they beat Alabama and Georgia in the SEC tournament SEC championship back-to-back games, how can you not make a case because of their resume for them to be in the top four? And I'll get your y'all's opinions before we, of course, go to the elephant room in Cincinnati.
Well, I'm going to chime in here on the SEC West because Bama is sitting high and mighty for some reason that I can't figure out. I wouldn't have had them anything close to 2 right now. Like you said, I think 4 is the highest I would have them. 5 is the lowest. But, like you said, they favor the SEC. But Bama's not in the driver's seat by any means. This weekend with Texas A&M and Auburn, even if A&M beats Auburn and Auburn beats Bama, it puts them in a 3-way tie that Texas A&M then has the door open to win. Yep. If Auburn beats both, they're in. So this is all but decided by any means for Bama. So to have them at 2, I mean, you could switch them out with Auburn in 4 weeks and totally. I mean, 2 is just too high to me. I'll tell you, I had Georgia at 1. I have Michigan State at 2 because they are the leaders of the Big Ten right now. And you've always given Ohio State the same benefit of the doubt when they're undefeated. They have Ohio State in a couple weeks. We're going to see what happens. But until Ohio State knocks them off, they are the undefeated Big Ten team. I think they wear the crown at 2 for me.
And another thing we're forgetting, this is lost. Alabama struggled against Florida. I mean, we thought Florida was a really good team during that struggle. So, and I know it was at Florida, just like the Texas A&M game. It was an away. But if you're a legit number 2 team, you're allowed one off game. I look again, bringing Clemson into it. Pitt, Syracuse, NC State, all these times they've slipped up and lost one game. I give grace to one game where if you just – because it is so hard, especially in the SEC, week after week after week after week, in the SEC West, to play all the way through and not have a bad game, especially in August, September when you're bringing new staff in, new players. But that was another thing. I was very surprised they put Alabama at number 2, and it's just – to me, that's where I lost a little bit of respect for the committee because that shows me they're more about the money because they're still giving them a chance when who of the one-loss teams has the worst one-loss? It's Alabama against Texas A&M.
Yep.
Because at the time they were unranked. So now they're sitting at 14th, but we all know they're going to boost Texas A&M's stats to make Alabama look better.
And I don't know. I mean, you could also make an argument too that Oregon is tied right there with them as far as having one of the worst one loss because they lost to an unranked Stanford. Yep. But it's the same way in the Pac-12. You know, you play against your own division rivals. You always run that risk of potentially losing, and that's why I would almost argue that you could still probably put Oregon or Ohio State in because I'm a big proprietor of. I don't really necessarily agree that one-loss team should necessarily always be in. I think you have to look at, obviously, who they play. Bama lost to an unranked Texas A&M team. Now, like you said, am I going to discredit the fact that Bama is probably one of the top 4 teams in America? Absolutely not. They are 100%. They will dominate pretty much any team that they play for the most part. But, again, you lost to an unranked team in the SEC. Ohio State has a legitimate loss because they lost to a very highly ranked team in Oregon. You can very much make an argument for Ohio State in that regard. And Oregon lost to an unranked, Pac-12, unranked Stanford in the Pac-12. So I mean, I kind of see where people would be frustrated at the fact that somebody like Cincy isn't up there. But like y'all said, we'll tackle that here in a bit. But it's hard for me to try to defend one-loss teams. But like you said, it's hard to be able to get in and out of that. But like you said, I think it's more for the money more than it is what teams are actually undefeated. Because then to me, why even really have the ranking system to start with if you just want the teams that you think is going to get you the most money and get you the most viewership?
Yeah, because right now everybody sees this as an invitational. It's not a playoffs.
No.
And unless they expand to really make it a playoff, I know we really don't want to see one versus. I mean, if you look at it right now at 1-8, I mean, you'd have Georgia and Oklahoma, Alabama, Michigan. Then you'd have Michigan State, Cincinnati, Oregon, Ohio State. That's a pretty good 8-team playoff if you was to do it. But other years, it's usually like a UCF or somebody that if you put them up against Georgia, they would blow them off. And that's like we keep on bringing up Cincinnati. We keep on creeping them in the door. We know everybody knows we're going to talk about them. But they don't. You cannot make a claim that you deserve to be in the top 4 when you've struggled against Navy and you struggled your last week. You struggled. You can Tulane. That's who it was. But everybody's like, well, Tulane played OU. Well, that was early in the season. I mean, that was like the Super Bowl. Of course they're going to want to play up for it. But
that was Spencer Rattler.
I guess I'll open up the whole can of worms on Cincinnati. What I see is they got them ranked perfect, maybe a little bit, only because you got Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma should be ahead of Michigan and Cincinnati. In my opinion, they should be. If you're looking on the rankings on where they're at, Oklahoma's better than Michigan and Cincinnati because Michigan's like Notre Dame. They play good, but in the end, they just blow it. I mean, you can't put Michigan at 7 when Harbaugh's got the whole. I mean, I think he's 0-9 against AP top 10 teams. They haven't done anything resume-wise to show that they deserve to be that high. So what's happened here is I'm thinking, you got Cincinnati at 6 because guess what? The committee is like, we're not just going to give you right off the gate. This is the first ranking, the first we got a month of rankings coming out. We're not going to just automatically put you in the top 4 because you're the darling. You're the new girl at school. They're going to make them earn it, which I think they should earn it because their schedule down the stretch is horrible. They're counting on SMU, but now SMU gets beat. Now they're out of the top 25. So I know you got to play who's in front of you, and nobody will play them because they're that borderline. If, say, Alabama schedules them in a home-and-home series, they don't want to do that because they don't want to risk losing to Cincinnati at Cincinnati, or in it just because in this day and age, one loss can totally screw you out of getting in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
The only way I see Cincinnati getting in is Bama's got a 2-loss. Michigan State could very well lose to Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say they got Penn State left as well. There's 2 games that they could lose on that schedule. Oregon.
Yep.
Oregon's another one. Their resume, how they've played in the past, they're going to slip up again. That's just, they might not, but just in the past, they're hoping for them to slip up. You do not want Oklahoma going undefeated because they're going to overtake you, and they should because the resumes stack up. If OU runs the table and wins the Big 12, they deserve Cincinnati's spot. So, I mean, a lot of this, and it always plays out. I think there was only one year in the college football playoff, and it was between TCU and Baylor, where there was some really screwy stuff that happened that either team could have got in, but, you can't put TCU at 3, they win, and then you flip them out because of Baylor or whoever got in opposed to that. It's what we can talk about now. And as I said last night, what would be the biggest splash with the World Series going on last night? How can we get the attention on us? What's going to make the biggest splash? Let's put Cincinnati outside the top 4, and everybody's going to be talking about us instead of the World Series.
Yeah. Well, also this statement is clear. Like you said, they put Cincinnati at 6 in the first one. The difference in putting them at 4, if they're at 4 in the first one, they can hold off the competition. At 6, they still have to prove that they can move up to number 4. So they put the burden of proof on them rather than give them that benefit of the doubt. I'll tell you, my biggest discrepancy is actually further down the list, and it's Oklahoma State at 11. I actually think they should be lower because I know they still got to play Oklahoma, but they're in the same boat as Oklahoma. They haven't played anybody, and they have a loss. So if you're going to put Oklahoma at 8, I think Oklahoma State and Baylor should be behind maybe Texas A&M or Auburn because they have played quality opponents all season.
Yeah, and again, you got to look at some of these teams that are ranked where they are. Is it because to benefit them, or is it to benefit the teams that are above them to help boost their resume? Say Wake gets beat or Notre Dame gets beat. Now Oklahoma gets in the top 10. So when OU and OSU play, that's a top 10 matchup. So now OU gets to put that on their resume because they're a name brand. Hey, now I've got a top 10 win over a rival. So it all plays into what's going to get us the best television, what's going to get us the best ratings, and how is getting these rankings going to boost? Because guess what? There's ADs on these committees. There's people that has money invested in these conferences.
Oh, yeah.
You can't sit there and tell me you got an AD in every conference and they're not looking out for their best interests. I mean, if a guy is like the AD of Michigan, he can't be in the room during – that's like taking somebody out on Survivor and putting them on the daggum island. They're all going to still be talking about them. It's crazy to me that you really think putting them outside the room and timeout for 5 minutes while they discuss your team, there's not some under the table stuff going on. But Ole Miss at 16, they're a really, really good team. And I think what happened, they put all their eggs in the basket of beating Bama. They didn't do it, and they got shook. And it took them a little bit to really get there. But I'll tell you also who surprised me, and again, the SEC, that's Mississippi State. We thought they were dead in the water. They were struggling to beat anybody.
Yeah.
And for them to come out and they play Arkansas this weekend and at Arkansas, And I know that was a team got all the way up to 8th. I don't want to make my own fan base mad, but that was kind of a premature. Just like if they would have put Cincinnati in the top 4, what they did to Arkansas, putting them in the 8th position, that helped Georgia because Arkansas was 8th when they beat them and just murdered them in Athens.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I kind of want to address a comment that we got that the NCAA should expand the playoffs to 16 and give every conference a chance. I don't agree with that because at that point, then like I said, then it just defeats the purpose of even having a regular season. Like just start everybody as a seed. Everybody go in, take a vote. Who you think's going to be the best team? Everybody start there. Everybody gets a one and done matchup, and then you move on. So I mean, I don't really see the purpose in that. Yeah, because I agree. Because to me, all honesty, even being a Michigan State fan, when I look at the Big Ten that's left, there's no really big team that kind of stands out to. Because I'll be honest, looking from 3 on, there's not really a major team that like stands out to me as far as being a contender that could go up against a Georgia or a Bama. Yeah, Michigan State's solid, but like Porter mentioned, they just beat Michigan in a top 10 matchup. But Michigan can't get out of their own way when it comes to Big Ten. They've never beaten Ohio State under Harbaugh. They haven't beat Michigan. He's 0-2. No, the new coach is 2-0 against Michigan. He has a losing record against Michigan State now. Ohio State has struggled. They lost a very. I think it was a little bit of a two things with the matchup against Oregon. I think it was a mixture of Ohio State kind of got exposed because they finally played a actually ranked and decent team that's outside of their conference, as well as I think towards the end Oregon started to play a little sloppy because Ohio State started to game plan around it, and it was just a matter of whoever had the ball left is the one that basically finished and won that game. And then, Michigan State, yeah, they beat Michigan. The big test will be, though, if they could beat Ohio State, since Ohio State is kind of the big dogs as far as the Big Ten goes. And then looking Wake Forest, kind of the same. Wake Forest to me has just kind of popped up out of the blue. Yeah, they've moved up to 9. The same thing. Who have they really faced? And then obviously the Cincinnati thing, as far as it being kind of the elephant in the room. To me, I almost think the NCAA should have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to schedules, because if you look at Cincinnati, obviously the first thing a lot of people are going to discredit is they've only beaten one ranked team. They beat Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, as we've seen in the past, will be super hyped up. They'll even be ranked like number 2. They're the second best football team in the country, and then they literally play someone in the Big Ten. They play the SEC, and they look like they're high school mascots. Like they're absolutely obliterated. So I mean, to me, the NCAA should have a little bit of flexibility. Like if Cincinnati's number 6, okay, we're going to create some more interesting matchups. Cincinnati, you're going to move into the Big 12. We'll have you take on somebody like Oklahoma State. That'll give not only Oklahoma State a chance as far as being able to show, hey, now you have a top 10 team to face. If you beat them, you move up in the rankings. Cincinnati, if you beat Oklahoma State, okay, you're continuing to show that you can actually basically play with the big boys and that you deserve to actually be in the playoffs. So I think a little bit of schedule flexibility would be good there. Even the same with Auburn and Ole Miss. If they wanted to have some of these other teams that maybe they're a little bit on the fence about, okay, have Oregon play someone like Auburn or Ole Miss and see what happens out of it. Because looking at the rest of these, I don't know where Minnesota came from. Minnesota has not been great all year. Wisconsin has been up and down. Iowa went from being the second best to losing to Purdue, which always seems to happen in the Big Ten. Purdue
should have been 2.
Purdue will beat number 1 ranked Ohio State every time. They'll beat number 2 ranked Iowa. Purdue is just that dark horse team. San Diego State in and out of the bottom. Pittsburgh, not really. Fresno State, no. Yeah, so to me, really, I would say those top 14 teams, and I'm going to discredit BYU because BYU has been in and out of that matchup a lot. Really, your top 14 teams are probably your best to even maybe have similar like what the NBA has as far as like a play-in tournament. Like have maybe your top 8 seeds for sure be in. And then you can do a toss-up with maybe your 9th and 10th seed on whether or not they're able to get in the playoffs as well.
If we was to expand, I think it would be 8 is the most that I would go. I mean, because I know we have an anomaly this year with. I mean, you look at how many teams have gotten beat in the first 4 weeks. It was the most since like the 30s. You know, how many top 25 teams got beat within the first 4 and top 10 teams.
Yeah.
If you start going to 12, I mean, it gets watered down. You're not going to have and then you're always going to be worried about, 13 and 4. I mean, you're always going to have that problem, whether it's 6, 8. I think if you go to 6, that's you're running in just as much same problems as doing 4. If you go to 8, you still have your 5 that you can, if you wanted to give each one of them, each one of the Power 5 conferences a automatic bid, then that leaves 3 more open spots for those at-large bids. And I think 3 is enough, because if you go 1 through 5, then you got 6, 7, 8 teams. So whoever's ranked the highest, like kind of like they do the P5, whoever's the ranked highest, say if you win your conference or whatever, they get in. I don't think you should automatically let a Power 5 in. We're seeing that with Cincinnati, the outcry to let them in. But I would love to see an 8-team playoff. Even if you was to give 1 and 2 a first-round bye, which I don't like buys when you already got a month off between conference championships and the bowl season. You have a month off. You could really make it happen where maybe you give them 2 weeks off instead of a whole month. You give them a couple of weeks off. That's plenty of time to prep for your first opponent and then carry on. And you can always tie the bowls games into it. You can get all these big bowl games, the 6 bowls. There's your 12 teams, but then you have like the Power 5, how it is now. You got the New Year's 6 bowls. You make those now the outside where you're going 9 through 12 or how many, whatever teams you want to do. But that's what, if it was to be any expansion, I would go to 8. I'm afraid if they do an expansion, it's just going to be 6. And I think we're 2 years down the road, we're going to be talking about the same problems we are now.
More than likely, yeah. And I would agree that 8 is a good number. I just want to throw 2 things out there. Mike Hughes said, "Oh, how my Clemson boys have fallen." You know, I blame you, Mike, because if Clemson is a 1-loss team, they're sitting probably right behind Bama or at number 4. And then we're not talking about, wow, Oregon and Ohio State. You know, they're the 2 teams out, and then it's not as big of a debate or discussion. And then we're like, oh, Cincinnati's still relevant. You know, there's not really
well, to defend that, Clemson, if you look at their preseason or their non-conference, they've always went out and played a big-time SEC school. They've played Auburn home and home. They've played Georgia home and home twice. They played Alabama. They had Texas A&M back. So they went out. They knew their conference was trash.
Yep.
And then they didn't know. You look at 2011 and 12, where South Carolina was. Their rival game.
They were good, yeah.
They were good. But now they've fallen off, so that's hurt them. You know, so they have went out and have played A&M and Auburn, and they played Alabama. They played Georgia, Alabama, Auburn. Then they played Texas A&M, and then they played Georgia again, their first game back from that. Other than that, I mean, of course, last year they couldn't because of COVID, but that's where I would discredit that because, and I do get the situation we're talking about. We're talking about Michigan State and Ohio State because they always give Ohio State love. Yes, they have given Clemson the love because they've had a bad loss and still got in. But they went out and scheduled people out in the first of the year and beat them to alleviate because they know that beating Pitt in an ACC championship game 42-0 is not going to be, you know, but yet and also when they do get to, other than the last 2 years, they performed very well. You had the 24-6 loss to Alabama in the semifinals, but every other year they've destroyed Michigan, or they destroyed Notre Dame twice, and then they got to the championship twice. And then, of course, what LSU did to them in 19 and Ohio State did to them last year. But yeah, they've fallen off this year, and I really hope that they can get it back. But you know, if it's not, hey, I got to see 2 championships in my lifetime that from a program I thought would never get there. So I can die happy.
Yeah. And I kind of agree. And I think part of it too is if you kind of have to look at those big money players as far as players that really stand out. You know, if you look at Ohio State, you know, who was a couple of those quarterbacks, you know, JT Barrett, you know, everybody wanted to see him, you know, Trevor Lawrence for Clemson, you know, Deshaun Watson, you've got, you know, Tua Tagovailoa for Bama. I think what they attract is they kind of want to attract these big names for these programs because think about it, if say for whatever reason you do have like an Auburn and you don't, the quarterback is one of those, he puts up decent numbers, they have some quality wins, but he's not that, that guy that everybody recognizes and knows. Like you said, they're not going to put them in there because what attraction does that bring if I have an Auburn versus like a Bama and then they just get absolutely destroyed? Like it kind of defeats that purpose, and to me, they kind of lost that with Oklahoma because now you don't have Spencer Rattler, and Sam is it Horwell out of North Carolina?
Sam
Howell.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Howell.
Yeah, if you look at those two were supposed to be the top quarterback prospects that are supposed to be coming in the NFL, and we've seen UNC start out ranked and then completely fall off, and then we've seen Spencer Rattler get benched because he's played absolutely terrible this season.
That's why we've got Jordan Davis in the Heisman talk for some reason.
Yeah,
There's no quarterbacks.
Yeah, and that's why I think too you also have guys like Kenneth Walker for Michigan State that
he should be in the Heisman. I mean, he's produced
exactly, and to me that's kind of what I like about the Heisman, and that's kind of what I like about college more than I do professional is the fact that you can have a running back. It's like, nope, this dude's the Heisman, or you can have a wide receiver be the Heisman. Whereas in you go to the NFL, who's the MVP 90% of the time going to go to? A quarterback.
Yeah. I gained a lot of respect for the Heisman committee last year, giving it to Devontae because he did deserve it, and it was a wide receiver. But you always look at the darling, like, it's always went to a quarterback. I mean, it's been 20-something years since a defensive player's won it, so – but we can save that for another show. But yeah, I'm very interested in seeing where these rankings go. I'm excited to see where our conversations go because guess what? There could be two different teams when we come back each week. You never know what you're going to get because this is a week to week ranking. So,
yep. And before we do go, I do want to do my part and defend Cincinnati because I know we've said, well, they don't belong right now, but hear me out on this. Okay, we look at Georgia. Show me one team in the top 10 of this rankings they've beat. Show me one team Bama's beat in the top 10. Michigan State, they've got one. Oregon has one. Cincinnati has one, and they're undefeated. Oregon's not undefeated. Michigan State is, so that's kind of why I say Cincinnati should be, if not 4, on the steps of 4, in my opinion. Bama doesn't need to be there. They lost to number 14, and I think 14 is too high for A&M, in my opinion. But if you have that bad game, you're not a complete team. Georgia's not a complete team. We're not out of the water. I mean, Tennessee and Missouri, those could be games that could be, trap games. Yeah. Our offense is struggling, but I look at this list, and Oregon lost to Stanford. Bama, A&M, Ohio State to Oregon. But it wasn't just a loss to Oregon. They lost at home. They were dominated. The score does not show you the game. So I think Cincinnati has a right to be a little upset at not being at least 4th.
Yeah, I get your point. I do. And they have a right to be upset because they're undefeated. But to me, you got to look at their resume. It's like me saying, I've worked at Dollar General, I've worked at McDonald's, I've worked at all these lower level jobs, these entry level positions, and then automatically want to go be a CEO.
Right.
You got to look at the resume. Yes, they have the win against Notre Dame, but it's Notre Dame is not. If it would have been against teams that predominantly play good in big time games, that holds more weight, and it does. That is the whole reason why Oregon's at 4 because their game was against a legit Ohio State team in Columbus.
Right.
It's a huge difference because when you play the better teams, you're playing against more fans. And to your point about Georgia, their defense is too elite. They're causing too many turnovers and scoring too many points because you look at the Kentucky game. I mean, now there's a close game, but when you blink, it was a 14-point lead before you knew it happened. Last week's game, I mean, they're outscoring teams on defense.
Yeah,
their defensive production is outscoring their offense. I mean, so that's just until I see them have a weak game, to me, it's Georgia and it's everybody else.
And plus, Chris, don't discredit your Bulldogs. I think the Braves kind of broke the curse of starting out like 3-1, and then they didn't choke in the playoffs. So maybe they broke the Georgia streak of teams starting out hot and then not being able to finish.
Look, every time I post something on Facebook about Georgia, either my brother or somebody that I know just puts 1980, and that's all they put on the post. And I'm like, don't do that. No. But I mean, they're making a case. This team mirrors a lot defensively of that team. Now, offensively, I don't understand why JT's not playing. Some are going to say the running game's better. No, it's not. This running game is not better with Stetson. The running game is better when you put JT Daniels in, back up the safeties, play honest defense, and run between the tackles. We're not doing that.
If it's not broke, don't fix it.
But if you take away those points,
and when it comes to how he's played and his rhythm, you stick with the hot guy. If you start swapping back and forth, and you're like that's just like I said that quote earlier about the new girl in school. Just because the new girl come back, she's back at school. Oh, we're automatically going to go. And the way their defense is playing, he's allowed a little bit of leniency. If he starts, look at the national championship game, and Alabama when they pulled Hurts and put in Tua.
Yeah,
they could do that. If he starts struggling, you got a backup. But I wouldn't take. I mean, their team, their flow. It's just like you look at LSU's win. It was a team of destiny. I mean, they were just run ruling everybody, destroying everybody. Alabama had a year like that. Clemson's had a year like that. Georgia's having one of these type years, and the only team I see tripping them up, it's Coach Saban and Alabama. That's the only loss I see them getting is if somehow, But I just think Georgia's defense is too good, and we've seen Alabama struggle in those type of games against A&M and Florida to prove to me when there's a legit defense, they can outscore Georgia.
Yeah, and I think the other problem too is, to me, this is not as deep of an Alabama team as we've seen in the past.
No, right.
They had Henry Ruggs, you had Jerry Jeudy, you had Jalen Waddle, you have Devontae Smith, you had Najee Harris. You've always, your second, third, and fourth string guys are NFL starters even. So to me, they don't really have that standout guy. Even their quarterback, is it Bryce Young? Even he's not really that that next man up like it was with you had Jalen, and then you got Tua, and then Mac comes in. None of these guys. It seems to me now their depth isn't what it once was, and I think that's what's honestly kind of hurting Alabama. Because as I agree, if even though Georgia their offense isn't the greatest, if they can stop Bama's offense, that's really all you need to do.
Well, just don't make it about a field goal kick, because I have no confidence in our field goal kicker.
Hey, not even the NFL has confidence in them right now, so that's okay. Yeah.
Well, guys, we've absorbed as much time with Porter as we can. He has another show he does right after this one. Okay. Tune in every week. We're going to do this Wednesday on Q. The playoff rankings come out Tuesday, so we'll be ready with some rebuttals on Wednesday.
Been a good show. I mean, I'm real. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to this because this is always a hot topic to discuss, and with the good games coming up this week, and I know we'll have some yawners, before the conference championship. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all plays out.
Me too.
I agree 100%.
Well, we will catch you guys in a week. Hope everybody has a great week and a great weekend coming up, and let's get her done.
Let's do it.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making up plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics, living the same. All presentation, sports information. Hitting the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays, like working your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays.